good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, from wherever you are in the world watching us today on Surgery International. As you know, we're running these webinars over the last 18 months to bring a community of surgeons together from across the world to discuss latest techniques and technologies, and also the kind of dilemmas that we have as surgeons working in modern clinical practice. Surgery International was set up to build a community, and it's unique in that sense to bring the world's news together and bring global connections together to discuss the future of our profession. We now have 30,000 surgeons subscribed to our newsletter on a weekly basis across 145 countries. And today, this webinar for the surgeon social media, we have hundreds of surgeons signed up from 65 countries. So thank you for joining us today and for supporting us over the last 18 months as we try to drive change in our profession. I'm super excited by this one because this is something slightly different than you might normally expect from clinical practice. It's, of course, social media, which is part of our lives and also encompasses all that we do. And the question is, how do we manage that? How do we deal with it? How do we navigate through this kind of myriad of difficulties with social media, particularly in the current context of 2024? I've got a fantastic panel, and I'm so looking forward to seeing what they say and learning from their experiences. So I'll start from left to right on my screen, and they can introduce themselves because I can't do them justice. Liz.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Dr. Liz O'Riordan. I was a breast surgeon who got breast cancer for the first time in 2015, then again 2018 and 2023. I was forced to retire and I was bored, so I started writing and blogging and tweeting and creating videos just to kind of help explain what cancer is. And I've seen it from both sides of the table and seen how much misinformation is out there. And I've now grown to over 150,000 followers, which is nothing compared to the guys you're about to hear from. But it's been a real challenge to learn how to interact and how to explain science without getting angry, without being trolled, and so people can understand what you're saying.
Thank you, Liz. So look forward to getting your insights from a patient perspective on social media, and you share some amazing personal stories, and thank you for that, for showing what you have to the world as a whole. And also, of course, as a clinician and from a professional background. Next on my left is the amazing Dr. Karan, who I think I can actually say he's the world's most watched surgeon doctor on TikTok and social media. Is that about right, Karan? Have I got you right? You're on mute, I think.
Mute.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm going to trust you, Shafi, but I don't really like to talk about, how many followers I've got or whatever. But, I started, I'm Karan, I'm a general surgeon in the NHS. And I started YouTube about 12 years ago, maybe about 13 years ago now, just to fill a gap that I saw in the market to create some high quality educational material for healthcare professionals, students, OSCE training, things like that. But over the years, I realized that my time would be better spent teaching the public on public health issues rather than just telling, a small demographic of healthcare professionals how to examine an abdomen. And I thought that was the call of the day. And it was proved right because in the COVID pandemic and beyond, there was, so much nonsense online. I always say one thing is that beyond the kind of vanity metrics, as I like to call them, the followers, the likes, the shares, all that kind of stuff, the most important thing is making a difference to one person's life. Everyone on this panel has probably had dozens of messages from people that they've directly impacted with just one of their videos. And, that trumps everything because, what's the price on changing someone's life? So that's why we all probably do what we do. And that motivates me to keep going.
Thank you. And thank you for doing what you do, Karan, because I see sometimes your messages that someone sent you back a message saying you've changed their life or they've gone to seek advice, and you really have impacted people directly. With those a huge following, it's quite a personal relationship that you have sometimes with your patients or people that follow you. So thank you for that. Ahmed, tell us about yourself.
So hi everyone. I'm Dr. Ahmed Ezzat or Dr. Ahmed Ezzat is my handle, formerly Dr. Mishmash, but I'll say this out of relevance because there is a point to this. To be honest, I'm very humbled to be on this panel of genuinely phenomenal colleagues who I know well, and I feel the UK is lucky, to be honest, to have content creators and clinicians who genuinely care about the message that they are, pursuing for patients and to change their lives. my interest really predominantly has been on TikTok and increasingly on YouTube through monthly news that is reliable, that's easy to understand, that's just bite size, which is a lot of what other colleagues also do. But also, I'm a general surgeon in training by trade, also an academic. So I try and use that to the advantage of simplifying information for members of the public. And again, I think the same central message, which is trying to improve people's lives, being in public health campaigns, being in environments that I never would have thought that I would be in, to give wider reach beyond the four walls of a clinic room, right? Where you've got accessibility to thousands of people to deliver a coherent message. So
thank you, Ahmed. Thanks for joining us. I look forward to hearing what you say from someone who's slightly younger than some of us in surgery, who's going through a training period, who has different insights to perhaps what we have. And you mentioned that before about challenging the dogma tradition of traditional surgical practice. I'd love to hear more about that during our conversation. Now, we have the creators and the surgeons, kind of one side. On the other, not opposite, is someone who supports us by building the platforms and giving us the availability and the ability and the visibility, if you like, to use our content creation to reach large audiences. Vishaal, do you want to introduce yourself? And you made it home.
I power walks it. I've made it home. Hello, everybody. So nice to be here. And I am Vishaal. I'm the imposter of the group. I'm not a surgeon nor a practicing clinician of any sort, actually. So I am a retired clinician. I merely did my F1, F2, and then jumped out about 10 years ago and did various things in consulting, digital health, and I've now been at YouTube for the last 3.5 years. So I've been helping to set up the YouTube Health initiative in the UK, and I will talk a little bit more about what we are doing, but we are kind of working very closely with Liz and Ahmed and Karan and so many other fantastic clinician creators on the platform. And this is a global effort, so I know that we've got attendees from all over the world. So I represent our UK efforts, but we have also got a similar setup in a lot of other countries around the world that you guys can hopefully benefit from. So yeah, look forward to the conversation, and thank you for the invite, Shafi.
And thank you, Vishaal, for all that you do for the healthcare community at large. I know you've been working really hard since you took up the role at YouTube, building communities across the NHS, across ICS, primary care, trying to build that conversation and almost encourage them to take part in creating good content that's reliable and that's accurate, that's honest. So thank you for what you do, Vishaal, to lead the kind of change, which hasn't been easy, of course, since you started over the last few years. But thank you for that. Okay, so right now into the webinar itself. Now we've had the opening conversation about who these people are. They are global superstars, of course. Liz, I'm going to come to you first because you kind of shared two stories. One is the patient, which is very empowering and very personable. And also, of course, people have been inspired by your conversations as a patient. On the other side, you have the professional outlook of how do you maintain someone, of course, who's been a working surgeon for many years and actually has the credibility, and is how you manage the professionalism. I'd like to get both those sides of the story, how you're managing both and kind of walking that tightrope of ensuring that you're credible the whole time.
So it's really hard. I started on Twitter under my maiden name, so patients wouldn't recognize me. That fear of a patient knowing who I was. So I tweeted under a Reardon, I worked under Ball. And when I got breast cancer, I said, I can't keep this secret. People are going to recognize me. So I started blogging about it. And that kind of led to talks and people asking to know more on what it's like being a doctor who's a patient, because it's kind of unique. But after a while, people kept, a bit like Karan, people kept sending me videos. Is this true? Is this true? And I realized there's a desperate need to explain what cancer is, how it's treated, because I now know patients remember nothing when we give them bad news. They're going to Google, they're going to YouTube. So for me to use my brain to think, right, I can take a clinic consultation and I can break that down into 12 little videos and I can explain it using really simple words. And it's been really lovely to get the reactions of people saying, thank you, I now understand this. The hard part is for me, though, that when you start calling out myths, things that are nonsense, the haters are going to hate. There's a lot of conspiracy theorists out there, and I've learned the hard way not to react, not to reply in the public forum and just block and restrict. And it doesn't happen very often, but when you put your head above the parapet, it's remembering I am a doctor, you have to follow the rules of GMC guidance, you can't bully people online, you are held higher than the people almost contradicting you. But I've really enjoyed the creative challenge of working out how to explain science using oranges and props. And it's been really fun to learn a completely new set of skills.
But yeah, so you've had to kind of walk that tightrope. And also, as you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of hate out there, of course, across social media. It's become quite venomous at times, and it's quite difficult to just open up social media. It's almost quite depressing when you start reading some of the messages, for example. And I agree.
Most people are lovely. It's about 5% of the comments I get. Most people follow me because they like what I do. They want to ask questions. They're interested. Most of it is lovely. And I'd say don't let the fear of being trolled stop you going on social media, because it's an incredible platform to share and make a difference to people's lives.
Yeah, and you just have to be sensible about it and understand that whole process. Thanks for that. And is the minority who seem to have a loud voice sometimes. Karan, to you. Now, I guess, you've had an amazing journey through social media. Tell us about the kind of why you do this and the benefit that you has for surgeons as a community. And of course, you mentioned also the benefit that you have for patients. I'd like to get more about that, hear more about what you're thinking around why you do social media, how you do it, and the impact that you potentially might have.
Yeah, I mean, the why is quite simple, really, because I see it as an extension of our job as a healthcare professional. If you look at the good medical practice guidance from the GMC, it's about disseminating health advice. We do that in the clinic. We, just automatically as a reflex give out patient leaflets, which end up no more than expensive toilet paper. Who reads patient information leaflets? People are looking online for information. So if you really want to disseminate information and, I guess, improve health literacy, you need to be online. Whether that's controversial or not, the next generation of consultants in 15 years' time will probably all be social media superstars, with hundreds of thousands of followers. Whether that's good or not, I don't know, but that is the reality we face. So you kind of have to get on the roller coaster or just stand by watching everyone do their thing. Now, with regards to the impact it's had, I feel it's actually improved my own practice as well. So, I think just in terms of improving my communication with patients, using less jargon, more lay terms, taking even more time, understanding that there are all these myths and kind of, understand that to allow good patient outcomes and to allow a patient to, not reject my advice or reject medical advice, you need to kind of make them a stakeholder in the decision. And part of that is actually raising their level of health literacy and understanding. So, for example, I see a lot of patients in the clinic with gallbladder problems, for example. You may not be able to get rid of their gallbladder pain until you do an operation, but even explaining to them the kind of physiology and the pathophysiology of why they get gallstones and why they get the pain, understanding where and why the pain comes from is sometimes enough for them to just deal with it. And I think that's huge. So just patients understanding what you're talking about and having less of a didactic relationship where it's kind of like a, pupil teacher and it's more of a level playing field. I think that really improves healthcare outcomes. And I know Vishaal and some of his colleagues at YouTube recently published a paper which suggested that health information can actually influence health outcomes, health information online. And that's what we do. So, if you have good information online, patients have resources to go and look at it. And, ultimately that means improved health outcomes. How many colorectal surgeons in the audience watching have heard the myth from patients that they can't eat nuts or seeds because they have diverticulosis? Where did that come from? And actually, high fiber things are good for someone with diverticulosis. Where did this myth come from that the seeds will get stuck in small diverticular patches? Just harmful things like that. It's crazy the amounts of misinformation that can spread and affect health outcomes. So that's really my why and how it's affected me and hopefully patients who are watching my videos.
Well, thank you for that. And of course, you've had a lot of videos out there. And what I like about what you've done, actually, you've demystified the world of medicine. You brought it home to a lot more people in the language they understand. And actually, I think that's been great because when you're in front of a patient, as you suggested, and Will was mentioning it, the minute they leave the clinic, they've got virtually everything you told them, particularly when you're breaking bad news, for example, or you tell them a diagnosis that's quite difficult to take, or indeed consenting for a social operation, they'll forget everything, they walk out the door. So what you've done is demystify that, make it more accessible to more people, and people feel more comfortable asking difficult questions. So colorectal, for example, as you both know, can be quite embarrassing. And a lot of problems we've had over many years is encouraging people to come forward for screening, for tests, because it's a bit embarrassing for other people. What we've done is demystify it, make it more acceptable. People are now saying, yes, we can go ahead and go and be seen or have our symptoms checked out. So thank you for demystifying that. Do you think that makes you a better doctor? You mentioned it makes me better. I think you're right. Your communication is better because you're down a level that people understand. Do you find that, Karen, that your communication has improved?
Yeah, I mean, listen, as a surgeon, you need to, know how to operate, sure. But, all experienced surgeons will tell you, I mean, I've heard it right throughout my training. Surgery is just one part of the puzzle, right? You need to actually be holistic in the sense of you need to know how to communicate, know when not to operate. There's all these other facets, kind of these kind of softer skills. And, softer skills comes in the form of your body language, communication as well. And I think putting yourself in front of a screen every day or on a regular basis, recording yourself, your language changes, the information that you consume. So when you create content, all content creators create content, but also consume content because you get your inspiration and ideas from the consumption of content on there. And from that consumption, you see what people's pain points are. People want to know more about hemorrhoids or, breast cancer or bowel cancer symptoms. So from that, you understand what the kind of mass psychology is. What's the problem? What are the frustrations? Doctors are not taking women's periods seriously or kind of gaslighting them and saying it's not painful. So you see all of these things online and you realize, okay, that's the problem. This is how I can help patients advocate for themselves. And I think that's what makes you an all-rounder as a doctor. You learn how to operate, but you also learn how to advocate, communicate, and just speak like a general team player. And I think that's really important because when I started as an F1, I'd always thought I was a pretty decent communicator, but it's only now, kind of, 11 years down the line, I could look back at when I was a first year doctor and say, wow, I'm so much better now than I was back then. And I would put the majority of that down to, my last 10 years on social media, putting videos out every single day.
Thank you for that. I think you're right, because one of the things that we have to be careful about is how we push information out, that it's professional, it's credible, and whatever's out there is out there in the greater kind of through the web. So it's visible forever almost. So you have to almost think twice about what you're doing, how you're putting it out there. Is it the right slant? Am I being accurate? And so it does add more, I guess, accuracy of every word you say to ensure that it makes sense and it's credible. Ahmed, now you're the kind of the digital native from us, okay? You're the guy who's young, who's been built up on digital innovation and technology and social media. It's kind of your life. That's kind of what you guys do, right? Tell me about your role and how you decide to encompass social media in your training, but also now to be more of a content creator. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, thank you for calling me young. I think I'm kind of factually, I don't think I'm as young as I was. I mean, PhD aside, which I'm busy trying to defend, I'd be finishing in a year. So, but I think starting off, a reason I started off by saying formally Dr. Mishmash is because I started off actually the journey with another colleague who's a GP and fantastic on social media. And we were both on a course together on leadership, which the NHS offered and now has disbanded. And whilst we were on the bus, I was telling him I really want to, be involved. And I was going to start off in a very different way, a lot more lighthearted, but then I kind of gravitated towards wanting to be involved in content creation from a clinical perspective. But then something dawned on me last year. So I was very fortunate, and I say this honestly because, I was kind of approached by TikTok's head of creator in UK and Europe, and they said we've seen some of the stuff that you do. Do you mind doing these campaigns for us? And then I went to up and down the country and filmed around measles and MMR vaccine uptake, and it was a really wonderful experience for myself and being exposed in phenomenal environments and trusts and speaking to experts, etc. And then I was involved in another campaign, and then I thought, actually, going back to what Karen and Liz are saying, it is a serious message because we impact on patient lives, and as YouTube has proven, we impact on people's lives. And so I thought I had the obligation to change my name to my actual name so that I'm accountable, so that my information is traceable, and that my professional qualifications and credibility is also available, which is really, really important. And I think through content creation, and actually there are phenomenal, F1s, F2s that are creating content, and they are outstanding. And I think, as Karen said, I mean, whether you join it or not, this is inevitable. And I think there is an absolute duty upon us as clinicians to create this content so patients can access it, because the alternative is that they go online, that they listen to non-clinically trained individuals who are sensationalists, who are on, main channels on TV, saying absolute nonsense, and frankly, it's harmful to others. And that's really what I found, that actually by being on social media and creating content, it's actually made me 10 times better. Because now when I'm in clinic seeing a patient and I'm really frustrated, thinking my old me would have said, I really want to move on now, I can't be preaching patience, empathy, and actually seeing the comments that people are saying where they're almost grieving for the loss of time with clinicians to take care of their health, and then not translate that into my personal practice. So all round, I think it's mutually beneficial to both the clinical creator and members of the public.
Great. I think that's really important to hear. We've heard the fact that it helps you communicate better. It helps you understand how to push out information in a way that's measurable and that's credible, for example, being very careful. It teaches to be, I think, have more empathy for patients as well, because you're learning about how they behave and how they have their conversations. On the other side, of course, we have most famous doctor of all, sorry, Dr. Karan, there's a more famous one than you. And that, of course, is Dr. Google. And that is our most famous doctor that's universal, known by everybody. And Dr. Google has a responsibility to help us create the content, to have the platform, to have a voice, also to be considered in the approach that they roll out healthcare, for example, on social media. To that mind, of course, Vishaal has a perfect position since he's took up the position. Is it 5 or 6 years ago? I can't remember, Vishaal, when he took it out. But tell us about your role. What are you seeing over your experience over social media and YouTube over the last 5 or 6 years, and how the UK, for example, is building its reputation to build good quality content?
Yeah, thanks, Shafi. It's been a few years, but I'm glad it feels like longer, right? So it feels like we've become a part of the establishment with YouTube Health and with our clinician creators. So, I will start by saying that I think that there is no point simply talking about what YouTube Health is doing in this space in the UK. So I think we need to go global with this. For one thing, I mean, if you look at all of these guys on the panel, actually a lot of their viewership will be coming from outside the UK as well. So that which is being created in the UK is having a global influence. But also, there is no point us on YouTube simply being the only ones kind of trying to push the agenda here. So I think that this needs to be a cross-platform initiative, but also needs to be a cross-internet initiative, actually. And so to the extent that we do scope this, we could scope it to video content at least. And, what I'll say is our starting point was that we are a fantastic media company, a fantastic advertising company, but we are not necessarily health experts as Google. And so we need to lean very heavily on third-party experts in order to create the infrastructure around the health products that we are going to build. So a small part of that is bringing in the likes of myself to be the kind of the front face of the initiative on the YouTube side. But then we have been working very closely with the Academy of Medical Royal Colleges, with NHS England, with the GMC, with various other stakeholders in order to create a set of content standards that we have that we require all of our clinician creators and health organizations to abide by. And actually, you know, talking about the fact that this needs to be cross-platform, that was not a YouTube specific thing. So that was a report and a set of principles that was put out online in order for anyone and everyone creating content online across any platform to help guide their approach to creating content. And so that was kind of our starting point. And we then layered that on with the lens of our internal checks and balances to review content from these so-called expert channels, making sure that there was no previous history of misinformation, that there was no previous content that was being shared without an evidence base and that type of thing. And so, you know, putting those things together, the kind of adherence against these content standards and our internal checks and balances, and making sure that there was a critical mass of content available on a particular on any one channel, was what then enabled us to make a channel or a source eligible for our health shelves. So if you now search on YouTube, at the top of the search results, if you search for any health topic, at the top of the search results, you see a shelf labeled from health sources. So that contains a video specifically coming from authoritative sources. And then you get a label against those sources saying from a licensed doctor, from an organization with a licensed health professional, depending on the nature of your organization or kind of your profession. So that's kind of the starting point for what we've been doing to create a little bit of rigor and structure around the content, the health content that you see on YouTube.
Thanks for that, Vishaal. You've done a great job in really kind of bringing content creation into the heart of the health service, not just here, but on a global level. One thing I was going to ask you actually is, so surgeons often want to showcase their best videos of surgical operations, kind of who we are, right? And they only show the very best ones, if they have any complications, right? So they put them on the video, they put it onto YouTube, etc. Where's the ethics around that? Because these are operations, we're not sure about consent, not sure about how they are taken and also uploaded. And there's millions of them. It's not just one or two. YouTube is full of surgical procedures and operations. Where do surgeons sit with that? I always want to ask that question to someone from a regulator or someone who runs a platform. What do we have to do with those ones? Can you give advice to people out there who want to build a platform and mainly some surgical videos? That's what they do, right?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. It's a very good question. And I will be very candid with you that we don't necessarily have a policy around patient consent, stroke confidentiality when it comes to sharing information on videos on YouTube. It does go back to the fact that we are kind of a fantastic media organization, but not health experts. So we're not kind of in a place, just in the same way that we wouldn't be able to police or kind of put consequences upon one of our clinician creators for any misinformation they put on the platform beyond removing it from YouTube. So in the same way, we don't have visibility of how that video was created and whether consent was secured from that individual and if it was necessary or not. So we don't have the enough kind of information to be able to kind of act on that video. I'm sure that Liz, Karan and Ahmed have got kind of very rigorous approaches to sort of what makes them comfortable to put information about patients online. But yeah, from our point of view, actually it's very difficult because we don't have that visibility about whether and how consent was gathered.
Yeah, no, I remember going back 10 years ago when I first started social media. I was doing live operations and kind of pushing the boundaries of what was acceptable. We had consent going through, etc. We had a lot of conversation from colleges around is that the right thing to do? Where's the ethical and moral dilemmas around that? And that really comes back to, I guess, Liz and the others around, okay, so ethically and in terms of morally, how do surgeons face that balance between confidentiality, sharing content, and being careful about not to kind of be, I guess, going against the GMC guidelines or good medical practice, for example. We've seen many young doctors make that mistake now, maybe older as well, who literally share things they should perhaps share about, either patient information or something. How should we go about making sure what we do is ethically sound? Liz?
Well, I guess it's not really an issue for me because I'm no longer practicing as a surgeon, but I do get worried about videos that I do see, especially someone's taking a photo of them in a clinic as a patient and there are people behind them. And if you are making videos and you are getting paid for those videos on YouTube, you're getting money. I just think it's wrong. And I personally think if you are going to use anything to do with a patient in a video on social media to be seen by the world, to potentially be remixed, to make money off that video, there needs to be some form of consent. They have to know that their insides are going to be seen on YouTube. And it worries me when there are lots of companies that do various B-roll that are actors posing it, but I do worry that we are abusing patients and they have a right to say yes or no, I don't want to be filmed. But I'd love to hear what Ahmed and Karan do about it.
Yeah, please go ahead, Karan or Ahmed.
I think, I've got a sort of a flatline rule now, which I initiated on myself over 2 years ago, that I don't film any of my videos in a clinical space, even if it's after work or before work, and I'm in a scrubs changing room, in the male changing rooms. I just don't do it in any clinical setting anymore, because if you look at all my videos, I'm just either in my pajamas, in my own clothes, in my garden, outdoors, anywhere non-clinical, because I think there's two things. There's a risk that people think that you're using this authority bias of a doctor and scrubs and stethoscope to kind of put your message across, which sometimes you might need to do to kind of rise above the noise. And number two, there isn't a strict GMC or trust by trust policy on social media, because it's such a new thing and there's been such a boom in doctors using social media since 2020 that they can, construe anything as potentially breaching some guidelines. And to be honest, whether you're in training or you're a consultant, whatever, you just don't want additional drama on your plate. And ultimately, the point of social media is to put a message across. So if you can do it at home in your own kind of comfortable setting, much better, because then no one can say anything about you.
And I guess if you were to film a patient and put it up, and the trust won't cover you if the patient sues you, because you're not doing that as part of your job as a doctor, you're doing it as your job inside. So you almost need your own medical indemnity to protect you if you are going to be doing things like that, your own consent forms.
Yeah, I mean, on that point, my personal view, so initially, and I know for GP partners, for example, it's a very different very different construct, because they are owners of their business, so they can do what they wish. But certainly, I think going to the age thing or the generational shift, and I guess, Prof. Ahmed and myself, we're at different ends as well in terms of the experience and where we are in careers. Starting out, there was a lot of it's your credibility and your neck on the line within your identity group being fellow doctors. And actually, we are very competitive. Surgeons are phenomenally competitive. And not only does that then play a role in terms of sometimes, conjuring up, frankly, obstacles that I don't want in my training, for example, where the dynamic is top down. But also I've had people say, do not film in the hospital. So what I started doing very early on was I said, I'm not going to be filming in hospital facilities in any way, shape, or form. I'm not going to be representing saying where I work, except for the fact that, I'm an NHS doctor. And the other thing is, if I was to ever, because when I've done campaigns or do any filming in a hospital setting, I very much take the approach of reaching out to the comms teams and making it very clear in writing that I would like to do this, and then they will give me either approval or not. So it's very, very legitimate, because ultimately, if for anyone out there who wants to film, and there's a few colleagues that do film in theatres and dance in theatres, my stance is, at the end of the day, it's you wouldn't be dancing in front of a patient in a clinic room. Of course, it's very lovely and it's a different aspect of content, but it's just about the extension of what you would do in your day to day. And really, you're opening up a Pandora's box, because the hospital owns these facilities, and really you are getting yourself in trouble.
Yeah, and I think it goes down to basic professionalism, how you define that now in the current context of social media, visibility, etc., and how to define ourselves in that role as surgeons. So that's really interesting. Thanks for that, for sharing that. In about 10 minutes, we're going to kind of come to some quick Q&A. So please do free to ask questions. And I've got some questions that come up to me through our moderator at the back end of the webinar. Vishaal, back to you. Now, a lot of people come to me, young doctors, young surgeons, and medical students, because I do a lot of teaching, of course, are desperate to become social media influencers, including my kids, by the way. My son's only role in life as a medical student, he wants to be an influencer. I said, okay, I'll speak to Vishaal today on your behalf. How do you advise people to create the content that's going to be valuable, that would then do well in YouTube? What advice do you give these young surgeons and doctors trying to have these dual careers and under pressure, almost peer pressure, to be these social media superstars and leave medicine early to make a lot of money?
No, thanks, Shafi. First of all, I'm very pleased to hear that your children are considering this line of work. It is blowing up. Health aside, you can see that the creator economy is literally percolating everywhere, and actually, YouTube is becoming an increasingly mainstream part of society. But I guess that the experts are on this panel and not myself. I am very much behind the camera. But the one thing that I will say about YouTube is that there needs to be a really solid why. So you need to have an objective for getting started. So it's not an easy journey. And, someone like Karan talks extremely really vividly about the journey that he's been on, right? And you see the numbers now and you think it's an overnight success, but he's been plugging away at this for years and years and years, actually, and has had multiple pivots on the type of content he creates. And I've had many an email from Liz saying that this is quite a hard journey, isn't it? It doesn't really happen overnight. And so this is the reality, that I think you need to have a really strong North Star for why you want to do this, which then keeps you going. And actually that has to be sort of associated with which type of content you want to create, which type of audience are you trying to attract, what is the overall message that you are trying to get out there. And then on the practical level, it's like, how are you going to make time for this? And what is the kind of return on investment equation that you look at? Is it that you need to generate ad revenue from the actual content itself? Is it that you're hoping to have some kind of off-platform opportunity, speaking opportunities, or whatever it might be, that are the return on investment? Is it truly just about amplifying the impact you have as a clinician? So I think that's a really important starting point. And obviously, I'm talking from the context of a health channel, but whatever channel you're starting, actually, whether you're someone to do a gardening channel or a channel about comics or whatever it is, I think really understanding why you're getting into this in the first place is really important. And the only other thing I will say is it is a matter of experimenting and trying new things, trying new content formats, trying new topics to focus on. When we launch a new product feature, like we launched podcasts a couple of years ago, we launched live streams, we've recently launched shopping, testing out all of those different product features and seeing what sticks and what doesn't with your audience is really important. So that willingness to innovate effectively, and then failing fast and moving on as far as content ideas go is I think really critical.
No, that's really helpful. We're speaking about questions in a few minutes. I guess the other thing to ask is for all three of you, the four of you that create content, is tips of what you've learned and what is the best way. There's no, of course, one way of doing these things. You've all shown three different journeys into social media. All three are amazingly powerful in what you do. But what kind of tips would you give young people or people who are now coming into this profession or in surgery thinking maybe in social media? Actually, before that, actually, Liz, to you, one question very quickly. Do you think the old guard, the old fraternity that we've grown up with, for example, are changing? Are you seeing a sense of more acceptance that this is part and parcel of who we are, surgeons, either to encourage it or support it, or at least help you navigate this world? I'll look at your thoughts, Liz, on what you've done.
I think the resistance is slowly dropping, and doctors are realizing that if they don't want to do this, their patients are looking for it. And for me, I think the biggest way to improve quality of care overnight is to digitally signpost patients to accessible, evidence-based sources of information, because they are looking for them. I used to tell patients, don't Google, and that was only 10 years ago, and it's the first thing I did. And I think you don't necessarily need to be on YouTube, but I think you need to be aware of what colleagues are doing so you can share and signpost that information, because it takes a lot of time and effort and money to do what the three of us have done. And I'm lucky, I don't have a job and I struggle to do it in the day. How Karen and Ahmed do it at the full-time job, I don't know. So it's hard to get into, but I think you need to be aware to direct patients to it.
Yeah, and actually one of the other things I was thinking, the advantages of that is disseminating good information and research. It often takes ages for good research output or good ideas or innovations in the past to disseminate through meetings and conferences, which are quite very analog. Now,
so what I now do is I work with the ICR, the Institute of Cancer Research, and if they've got a study coming up, they will send me the information before the embargo so I can have a video to explain it to the general public that goes live when the paper is released. So there are ways you can use your skills to help explain stuff to the general public.
Great. Ahmed and Karan, tips. Your 2 or 3 tips that you think, now this is what I think you should all be doing. Of course, it's a difficult question. I'd love to get your thoughts, Karan.
Yeah, I think it's difficult, right? But I think if you ask 100 creators what the tips are, the common denominator will be that you have to be consistent. Similar to all the surgeons listening or any healthcare professionals listening, just how you learned a surgical procedure. You didn't learn it overnight. You didn't learn how to cut out a bowel cancer overnight or remove a gallbladder overnight. It takes several weeks, several months, and you slowly, incrementally improve different bits. I remember when I was first learning how to remove an appendix, I thought it was insurmountable. And over several weeks, I did small components. And then eventually, after a few months, all of it came together. And it was still not great. But then over a few months of putting it all together, it then became fluent. And then, so I think the similar concept with social media, you might not have the best lighting, you might not have the best sound, you might not have the best camera. And it's about just doing the thing, first of all. So just speaking in front of a camera. You don't need any fancy equipment doing that. And then slowly over time, as your screen presence improves, you up the lighting, you up the audio. So, there's kind of like slow changes over time. And if I look at my content from 4 years ago to now, there's already, quite a, concerted difference between the two. And it's basically, it's a marathon. And if you keep putting yourself in front of a camera every single day, you will see huge improvements. And I think what I always like to say is that you cannot be successful without consistency. But equally, having said that, consistency doesn't guarantee success, but consistency is a prerequisite if you're going to have any chance of success, and it at least increases your surface area for having success. Whether that consistency is every single day you make a video or every single week, it's having some regular cadence.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And it's similar to being an entrepreneur. When I meet a lot of people who are building startups, one of the advice I give is about being laser focused, doing one thing really well, repeatedly, rather than trying to do everything and build a product that fits everybody. No, be very vertical, linear in your approach. Ahmed, tips that you might give people?
Yeah, I mean, I think Karen, you should probably put a video on the human factors of the statement that consistency is a prerequisite, but it doesn't guarantee success. Because I think if everyone out there wanting to start off takes that advice, to be honest, it's a very good way of almost try and work hard on it, create content. Don't invest in thousands of pounds of money trying to get people to edit your content to begin with. And just almost don't care enough about how many viewers, how many shares, how many likes. Just honestly, just post it and forget about it, as difficult as that may be, and just do it for the fun of it and use it as an exercise of improving and professionally developing, almost like you're acquiring a new skill in self-reflections. Just take it easy. And whether it does well, it does well, because the other thing to say as a parent to two children under 3, the reality is also we've all got lives, and I know of colleagues who will have completely transformed their social life, which is kind of the ugly side of things, being on a live session for 2 hours or 3 hours every single night, going home to create content, even skipping theatre to film in a locker, and people walking in to say, and these are, by the way, very, this is the source of other side of things. So just take it easy and enjoy the journey. And that's it.
I think it's important for people who are surgeons. It's a career choice. That's kind of what you do. You want to be the best that you can in the career that you've chosen. And social media adds value. You can do both. And I think people can do both now. Before, it'd be frowned upon to do something outside the realms of a single linear journey in surgery. Now people are experimenting, becoming entrepreneurs, becoming influencers. So there is much more diversity. I think the training sometimes doesn't support it, if I'm honest, being someone who's ran national training programs, been the head of surgical training, etc. I don't think we afford people enough flexibility in the approach of what they might need in terms of their careers. So yeah, that's very important. Thanks for that. A few questions that have come up, and I would deal with the one around this conversation that's being taking place on social media around the, I guess, the physician associates, etc. And we've all seen the kind of the toxicity around this whole conversation. I'd like to get your thoughts, Liz, on this first and foremost, around that whole conversation and what went wrong with it.
I think things never work well when they're played out on social media, because Twitter especially can be a very, very toxic space. You're in your own bubble, people say stuff. And I made a conscious decision not to comment, because anything I say can be used against me in the future. I can have my own private opinion, but I don't want to tip my toe in the water because it might come back to bite me. And I think you read what you read, you hear what you hear, and you think what you think. But to get involved as a doctor, I think can be quite dangerous. And I think some people said some things that were quite extreme and they can't take back. So I won't delve into that because I don't need that stress.
Yeah, no, that's a fair comment. I think you can make your choices about what you decide to write and not, so you engage with. And I always give an analogy. You choose your friends, right? Not everyone is your friend. So why does everyone have to become a friend on social media? They have to communicate with you. You choose, right? So you can select people on that basis. Karan and Ahmed, what are your thoughts around this whole conversation and how it's played out?
About the PAs?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the conversation that I saw happening, like the most was on Twitter, X, whatever. That's the platform where I have the least interest in, the least following in as well. I don't really, do much there because it does attract the most vitriol and most toxicity, I feel. And it's the most faceless platform there is, where people can literally just type stuff on keyboards and say random things. And, I've seen junior doctors sort of talk about, their seniors on there and all sorts. And I think, naturally, I've never worked with a PA, so I don't have any particularly strong opinions on this because I don't have a lived experience of this. I do understand the kind of pros and cons and the arguments from both sides. But, just to kind of echo what Liz said, anything you say on social media is a permanent imprint. It's there on archives. It can never be deleted. Someone will screenshot it, and it, opens you to, someone going and complaining to your regulator. For us, it's the GMC. So, what is the point? For maybe 100 likes, you make a statement that people think, yeah, well done, and then you land yourself with some investigation or some slap on the wrist. Is it really worth that? And I don't think the point of social media is to be like a silo where you complain about things. There are anonymous groups online, like on Reddit. You can do that if you really want to just vent. But if you have a public profile where people can see your name and your face, and they can track where you work, etc., there is no advantage to getting frustrated or angry online. And we'll all see comments that will provoke us or troll us, and that's the trap, engaging with that.
And you've got to walk away at some point, otherwise it becomes quite difficult. It becomes emotional and it affects your work life, your personal life, for example, if you kind of get engaged too much. I have the same policy, Liz. I decide what I want to go, that is important to me, that I have the energy for. I've moved from different platforms over the course of my 10 years, starting on Snapchat and Facebook, going to Instagram, then going to LinkedIn and X. I've been on all of them. TikTok's the one place I haven't spent much time on, but I shall work on that someday. So you've got to find the platform that you find most comfortable in that perspective. I guess the next question was really going to be around tools that you might use. I've seen a lot of people use video creators, where you can literally create a video. It splits into like small clips with the text messages, for example, underneath, and you just pop it up on X or on TikTok. And other AI now is now being produced, for example, platforms you can use to manipulate your videos, make it more attractive. Ahmed, have you used any of these kind of adjuncts, these social media kind of media platforms in your work? And could you recommend any to our audience?
So I'm very tight for cash, right? So, so I go for the simplest thing, which is CapCut, and a lot of other colleagues will use it. You can go as fancy as you want, and I'm sure be interested to listen to Liz and Karen about the other softwares. But ultimately, the principle of the video that's being created should be what platform are you hoping to post it in? Because that will affect whether it should be in landscape, in portrait mode, but also how long it will be on. For example, YouTube is the environment for authoritative content that will stand the test of time, but it will take a while to get the viewership, especially starting out. TikTok, it's more of a, in terms of the short-term gain, it's more of a, well, everyone's got a bit of a chance. And that's why sometimes people will go for the very high visuals, the props and things like that, to short videos to get the viewership, the sensationalism of the video. So it very much depends on that. But underpinning the content is understanding what do you want that person to understand at the end of it. And you should really focus on one nugget of information. If you go beyond that, then it becomes almost like when you go and speak to somebody in clinic, and every time I go through an operation list on the day to remind them, because we haven't told them in clinic, I know that 2/3 of it's just going above their heads and it just gets lost and watered down.
Vishaal, from your perspective, what support does, say, YouTube give to creators? I know you've got a brand new building being built as we speak at King's Cross, which I want to come and see, by the way, Vishaal, right? When it opens, and you have amazing support around that. What support do you give creators? People interested? I know that you've really had this selection of people that you promote because they're credible and they've gone through a scheme, if you like, of recognition. I can't remember what it's called. I'd love to hear more about what you're thinking of.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's what we spent a lot of time building over the last few years. It's like there's no point just having a really rigorous, hopefully safe platform for experts to share their content, but we also need to be supporting those experts across all stages of their journey. And so there's a spectrum for the really early stage creators. And actually, Liz has been through some of this spectrum, because I think that whilst I've been at YouTube, she's gone through a journey from being one of our kind of new creators, new kids on the block, really, to someone who's become a lot more established. And so we run accelerator programs that will help you when you're first getting started, which will be kind of a short condensed period of sessions where you are then working with a group of fellow clinician creators. And I think that's really important, to have that cohort feel that you're going through something together. And we will then provide a lot of support, white glove treatment for you during that period of time. So one aspect is that. Another aspect is the health creator community that we've set up. We've got over 350 clinician creators and health organizations who've joined that. We set that up in June of this year. So that offers monthly virtual sessions, as well as a WhatsApp group and regular newsletters with content tips to anyone and everyone who is creating health education content on YouTube. And so Liz, for example, and Karan, they have come and spoken at those monthly virtual sessions. And that's open to everyone. We then have a little bit more white glove support for our bigger creators, where we are trying to proactively work with them to make the most of new product features as they come on stream on the platform, identify interesting kind of opportunities for them to work with us in a more strategic way. And so, for example, we work very closely with Karan in that regard. And I also host quite a few health creator events where we have some of our most active health creators on the platform who are then invited to come together in person at least a couple of times a year to meet each other, to share their own learnings with each other. And so there's quite a range of different support. And then there's a range of resources, Shafi, that we've got online as well, which I'm happy to share the links with you afterwards if you can send out a newsletter to people. And those are freely available to everyone to access, even if they haven't started a channel yet. So, across the spectrum, from not having yet started a channel, just started one, trying to really quickly grow your channel, to being really established on the platform, we've got quite a lot of support for you.
Thank you for that. And we will write up this, our journalists write it up, and they'll add the links as you give them to us, Vishaal, as it goes to our community. Another question that's come up is around monetization, because doctors are bad at making money, right? Outside medicine, we do surgery, we practice, that's how we make money. How the hell do you make money out of social media? Has no one cracked it just yet? I love your thoughts, because that's going to be the Achilles heel. Is it the right thing to do? There's always been, and making money from these kind of things is almost anathema to our well-being as surgeons. Yet people promote things and push out things, well-being. I'm sure, Karen, you get overwhelmed by people saying, hey, I've got a product, can you sell it for me through your 8 million people on TikTok? How do you manage that? How do you monetize? Karen, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, say that, it seems to be a uniquely UK-centric problem where making money as a healthcare professional, as a doctor, is like a taboo thing. It's almost like it's a bit, medicine has to encompass everything. And if you're making money elsewhere, you're not working hard enough in medicine. That's kind of like the concept. And that concept is not, it doesn't exist in the US, for example, where it's kind of like a two-tier system. They're way more open to, making money, and the US creators online who are doctors, make incredible sums. I think, listen, there's very basic ways to make money, which is just if you keep making the same content you are on YouTube, you get advertising revenue. They take a split of the money you get from adverts, and then you keep, some as well. Similar, on other platforms, on TikTok, if you join the creator fund, if you've got a certain number of followers, and then you get paid per view. So, per 1,000 views, you might get whatever it is, like 2p or 20p. And then, you have to aggregate the views, and then you might get, a few pounds, per week or whatever it is. Beyond that, the next bucket of making money is obviously brand deals. As a doctor, you've got to take care in some of that stuff, because if someone's saying, hey, can you sell these vitamins for me? It's very easy to say yes for the money they're offering you, but obviously you're held to standards with the GMC, but also ethical and moral standards as well, because you're leveraging your authority and expertise as a doctor, and people will again be led by your authority bias and be more kind of open to buying things that you recommend as a doctor. So there's a lot of ethical gray areas around that. And ultimately, the step beyond that is, if you build a big enough of an audience, can you leverage that in other things? So, there are a lot of media doctors, who get paid to do documentaries. The Chris Van Tulleken is a good example. He's done lots of stuff with BBC, for example. I'm sure he gets, handsomely rewarded for things like that. I was offered to do a book deal. I published a book earlier this year, so that's a way to obviously monetize. I know Liz is coming out. She's done several books, and she's got another book also coming out, early next year. So that's another way to monetize. And beyond that, again, depending on the size of your audience, can you create some sort of product, whether that's an app or some sort of merchandise? Dr. Mike, who's one of the biggest doctors, in the world on social media, he creates lots of merchandise on his website and, other random little things. There's so many different ways to monetize. And I think the only limitation is your creativity, how you can leverage your audience and your kind of standing on the line to make money.
Back to Vishaal, very quickly for you. YouTube monetization, how does it work for people out there who may not understand? And you've got exactly 1 minute to do that.
So once you reach a certain threshold of views and watch time and subscribers, you can then qualify to generate revenue from ads on your videos. And so at that point, for your longer form videos, you will get 55% of the revenue, and YouTube will get 45% of the revenue share. And the split is a little bit different on shorts, but that's all ad related revenue. You can also activate memberships on your channel to put some content behind paywall and generate some revenue that way. As I had mentioned previously, there's also shopping on the channel, and so it's predominantly ad revenue, but there are increasingly other ways in which you can generate revenue too on the platform.
Thank you. I'm sending my children your way. So they can let their father retire. I'm just kidding, of course. Great. Well, we got to the end of our, I could have carried on for much longer. It's a great conversation. It's a new area for all of us, navigating through this kind of complex world of social media, understanding our role as surgeons, as clinicians, as advocates for patients. Also someone who shares knowledge on a wider scale. What kind of knowledge is that? How do you create content? How do you have credibility? How do you cut out all the noise out on the wider web, for example? Hopefully this hour helped you understand some of the journeys people have taken. Never easy, it's hard work. That's why I've seen from all of these people who are consistent, who work hard, build content that's really relevant, that's credible, that's patient-centric, patient-focused, personable, and honest. I think that's what's come across from all of our speakers today, the honesty around how they've approached social media, and they've shared all their ideas, of course, today. I'd like to thank each and every one of them, of course, Liz, Ahmed, and Karan from that perspective, also from Vishaal sharing the corporate kind of side of things, about how people should be creating content, what should be looking for, and how they'll support us on that journey. It's a collaboration. One of the C words I use all the time in the world that we live in is about collaboration, and how do you work together to build that content that's much more valuable? Because our role for the wider society is to create content that's accurate, that's reflective, and supports patients through their journeys. Don't ever forget your role as a doctor is to make sure patients have better outcomes and improve their quality of life. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next. Happy New Year to everybody from Surgery International, and we'll see you next year in the first webinar in January, which will be on robotic surgery. Thank you, all of you. Thanks so much.